Foravian Bile II carefully adjusted the focus on his diagnostic scanner, his feather wings rippling with concentration as he studied the latest test results from his bacterial culture research. The quiet hum of Station Medical 7's research wing surrounded him, punctuated by the soft beeping of monitoring equipment and the occasional rustle of fellow researchers moving between labs. A sudden alert shattered his focus, the station's emergency signal flooding the lab with pulsing amber light. His head crest instinctively flattened as the announcement echoed through the corridors.
Multiple critical trauma cases inbound. All available medical staff report to emergency reception.
Foravian's talons clicked against the polished floor as he hurried through the corridors, already running through preparation protocols in his mind. The research wing connected directly to the hospital section, one of the many efficient design elements that made Station Medical 7 the premier medical facility in this sector. As he approached the emergency department, he could hear his father's distinct voice rising above the controlled chaos.
I want 3 stasis pods prepared,
Dr. Bile commanded, his pristine white feathers practically glowing under the medical lights.
Full diagnostic array on standby. And someone tell me what exactly we're dealing with.
The emergency coordinator, a junior physician whose name Foravian could never quite remember, pulled up a holographic display.
A colonial vessel attacked by pirates. Most casualties...
She paused, checking her data.
Most casualties are human.
Foravian noticed his father's head crest, a subtle tell which few would recognize. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, and the station had limited experience treating them. This could prove challenging. The first pods arrived moments later, bursting through the atmospheric containment field in a rush of emergency propulsion. Medical teams swarmed each one, but Foravian found himself drawn to the third pod. Its occupant, visible through the transparent cover, bore the worst injuries he had ever seen on a living being.
This one's critical,
Nurse Rain called out, her efficient movements belaying the urgency in her voice.
Multiple compound fractures, severe tissue damage, possible internal injuries.
Foravian moved closer, his diagnostic scanner already gathering data. The human's body was a map of trauma. Bones jutting out at impossible angles, tissues torn and swollen. By any reasonable medical standards, his condition was terminal.
Identity confirmed,
another nurse announced.
Damien Lorien, Colonial Security. Found defending the escape pod launch bay.
Get him to critical care 3,
Dr. Bile I ordered, and then turned to his son.
Foravian, you have the most recent human physiology certifications. This one's yours.
Yes, Father. Foravian responded automatically, then caught himself. Yes, Dr. Bile. His father's head crest raised slightly. Amusement or irritation, Foravian could never quite tell. But there was no time to dwell on it as they rushed the pod toward critical care. The patient's vital signs were stable, barely, and they were maintained by the pod's stasis field. But they couldn't quite keep him in stasis indefinitely.
Dr. Bile!
A voice called from behind them. Both Foravian and his father turned, creating a moment of confusion before they realized the speaker. A human female with minor injuries being treated in triage. She was trying to get their attention.
That's my friend in there,
she said, attempting to rise despite a nurse trying to keep her seated.
Damien, I need to know if he's going to be all right.
Dr. Bile will keep you informed,
Foravian's father said smoothly, gesturing to his son.
The second, that is. He's handling the case.
Auburn Gray, she introduced herself, finally allowing the nurse to finish treating her wounds. Please, he saved all our lives. Foravian's wing feathers rustled with shared concern. We'll do everything we can, Miss Gray. But first, we need to assess the full extent of his injuries. As they wheeled the pod into Critical Care 3, Foravian's mind was already cataloging procedures, calculating survival probabilities, considering treatment options. But beneath the clinical analysis, a small voice whispered that this case might prove more interesting than he anticipated. Foravian meticulously adjusted the bioscanner sensitivity, compensating for the differences in human baseline readings. Critical Care 3 hummed with activity as the medical team worked to transfer Damien from the stasis pod to the treatment bed. Every movement had to be precisely controlled. One wrong shift could worsen the already devastating injuries. Neural activity stable? Nurse Rain reported, monitoring the displays. Minimal degradation from stasis. Ready to begin detailed assessment. The stasis field dissipated gradually, allowing Foravian to get his first unfiltered scan of the damage. multiple fractures along the left arm and leg, several showing compound breaks where bone had torn through muscle and skin, severe crushing trauma to the thoracic cavity, internal bleeding in at least 3 distinct regions. Fascinating architecture, Faravian muttered, studying the bone structure displayed in the holographic display. The cellular matrix is unlike anything in our database.
Focus on treatment, not research. His father's voice cut in from the doorway.
Dr. Bile I entered with his usual precise movements, automatically commanding attention from the medical team.
The patient's condition?
Critical but stable, Faravian reported, unconsciously straightening his posture. The stasis field preserved vital functions, but these injuries... He gestured to the most severe compound fracture, with splintered bone protruded to the forearm. Some of this damage looks to be permanent.
Then we'll need to consider cybernetic replacements, his father declared. Standard procedure for injuries of this magnitude.
With respect, Dr. Bile, Nurse Rain interjected. Human medical records indicate they often recover from similar trauma without prosthetics. They're healing processes.
Are poorly documented and largely theoretical, Dr. Bile I dismissed. We deal in medical facts, not speculation.
Faravian's wing feathers twitched with familiar frustration. Father, Dr. Bile, perhaps we should consult with Miss Gray. She might have relevant information about human medical response. His father's head crest flattened slightly. Definitely irritation this time, but he nodded.
Fine. Nurse Rain, please escort Miss Gray here. Ensure contamination protocols.
While they waited, Faravian continued his scans, paying particular attention to the cellular activity around the injury sites. Something about the readings seemed odd, but he couldn't quite identify what. The bone fragments, despite their severe displacement, showed unusual signs of... Oh, stars! Auburn gasped as she entered, seeing Damien's injuries fully exposed. She steadied herself against the doorframe, her face paling. I knew it was bad, but... Miss Gray. Faravian turned to her, keeping his voice gentle. We need to understand human healing capabilities. In our experience, injuries of this severity would require extensive cybernetic replacement. Is this standard for humans as well? Auburn shook her head. No, not usually. Sometimes for really severe cases, but... She moved closer to the bed, careful to stay out of the medical team's way. I've seen soldiers recover from worse. It takes time, but humans are pretty good at healing.
Time?
Dr. Bile I's head crest rose skeptically. How much time? Depends on the injury. Broken bones usually take 6 to 8 weeks to fully heal, although something like this might take longer. She gestured to Damien's chest. Internal injuries can be faster or slower, depending on the type. Faravian and his father exchanged looks. 8 weeks? For injuries that would take most species months or years to recover from, if they recovered at all.
Impossible,
Dr. Bile I declared.
The energy requirements would be...
Dr. Bile, Nurse Rain interrupted. You need to see this. The scanner display showed the first bone fragments beginning to align. Microscopic filaments of tissue already reaching across the breaks. It was barely noticeable. The kind of change that would take days to see in most species. It had been less than 4 hours since they removed the stasis field. Start recording, Faravian II ordered, his wing feathers quivering with excitement. Maximum resolution. Document everything. 3 days of continuous observation had left Faravian's feathers ruffled and his eyes dry from staring at scanner readings. It barely left Critical Care 3, except when Nurse Rain physically shooed him out to rest. The data coming from their patient defied everything he thought he knew about biological healing. Look at this density increase, he said to his father, who had finally deigned to examine his findings in detail. The holographic display showed a time-lapse of the worst compound fracture, where new bone material was already bridging the gaps between fragments. The cellular activity is orders of magnitude faster than any documented healing process. Dr. Bile I studied the readings with characteristic intensity, his head crest twitching as he processed the information.
And could be an artifact of the scanning equipment. Human biology often produces anomalous readings.
I have calibrated and recalibrated, Faravian countered, pulling up comparison scans. I've used 3 different scanning methods. The results are consistent.
The human healing process is actively knitting the bone back together.
That's impossible,
his father declared, though with less certainty than usual.
The energy requirements
would be massive, yes, Faravian interrupted, earning a sharp look. But look at his metabolic readings. The cellular absorption rate, the oxygen consumption. His body is perfectly adapted for this kind of regeneration. Nurse Rain entered with her usual quiet efficiency, carrying fresh sensor packs. Miss Gray is here again, she announced. She brought some human medical documentation that might be relevant. Auburn had been visiting daily, splitting her time between checking on Damien and helping the medical team understand human physiology. She entered carrying a datapad, her own injuries now mostly healed. Another example of human recovery that had caught Faravian's attention. I found some case studies, she said, handing the pad to Faravian. Similar injuries from mining accidents back on Mars. It might help you understand what to expect. Faravian's wing feathers rustled with excitement as he scrolled through the documents. This is extraordinary. The recovery time frames, they're consistent with what we're seeing. Father, Dr. Bile, look at these baseline healing rates. His father took the pad, scanning it with gradually widening eyes.
This can't be standard. These must be exceptional cases.
No? Auburn shook her head. This is pretty normal for humans. Actually, Damien's healing is a bit slower than usual because of how severe the injuries are. A simple break would be showing a lot more progress by now.
Slower?
Dr. Bile the First's head crest flattened completely.
You're saying this accelerated regeneration is below average?
A weak cough from the bed interrupted their discussion. Damien's first signs of consciousness since arriving. Everyone froze, watching as his eyes flickered beneath their lids. Careful, Nurse Rain warned as Faravian moved closer with the scanner. His pain medication might be wearing off. Damien's eyes opened briefly, unfocused and glazed. His lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Auburn stepped closer, leaning in. Water, she translated. He's asking for water.
Absolutely not,
Dr. Bile the First declared.
Not with the internal injuries of this magnitude. The risk of...
Actually, Faravian interrupted again, checking his latest scans. The internal soft tissue damage is already showing significant healing. Small amounts of water should be safe. He glanced at his father. Unless you disagree with the scanning data. His father's feathers ruffled with familiar irritation, but Faravian noticed something else in his expression, a grudging curiosity.
Proceed with caution,
he finally said.
Document everything.
As Nurse Rain carefully helped Damien take small sips of water, Faravian continued studying the scan data. The bone healing was remarkable enough, but the soft tissue regeneration. If they could understand how humans achieved this level of natural healing... Dr. Bile! A voice called from the doorway. Both Faravians turned automatically, causing another moment of confusion. A junior researcher stood there, looking uncertainly between them. The second, she clarified. Your bacterial cultures are showing signs of contamination. The lab needs you to...
Go,
his father said before Faravian could protest.
I'll monitor the patient.
He gestured to the scanner readings.
This requires further study.
The research lab felt confining after days spent in Critical Care 3, but Faravian forced himself to focus on his bacterial cultures. His previous work seemed almost trivial now compared to the medical revelations happening just down the hall. Still, proper documentation required attention to all ongoing projects. Your father's been in there 6 hours straight, Nurse Rain noted as she entered, carrying a fresh stack of data crystals. I don't think I've ever seen him so... She paused, searching for the right word. Obsessed? Faravian suggested, his wing feathers twitching with amusement. And now he knows how I feel. Fascinated, she corrected gently. He's reviewing the historical case files from Earth's medical database. Did you know that humans used to set broken bones with strips of tree bark? Faravian's head crest rose sharply. Primitive medical tech, and they still achieved these healing rates. How did they survive long enough to develop space travel? That's what I've been trying to explain, Auburn said from the doorway. She'd taken to spending time in the lab when she wasn't visiting Damien, her natural curiosity making her an excellent source of medical human history. We didn't develop advanced medicine because we needed it to heal. We developed it to heal faster, to manage pain and to prevent infection. The healing itself, I mean, that's just us.
Remarkable, Nurse Rain murmured, adjusting one of the scanner calibrations.
No wonder your species expanded so quickly once you reached space. Most races need extensive medical support for even minor injuries. Any and all minor mistakes could be catastrophic for those involved.
Faravian pulled up the latest scan results, showing 2 weeks of progressive bone healing. The compound fractures were steadily knitting back together. New bone growth bridging the gaps at a pace that still seemed impossible despite all the evidence.
In my defense training, Auburn offered, they taught us that humans are really good at not dying. As our instructor put it. You can break us, burn us, cut us, but as long as you don't kill us outright, we usually bounce back.
Defense training?
Faravian's father asked from the entrance, making them all jump. He moved to examine the latest scans, his pristine feathers almost glowing under the lab lights.
You're military.
Colonial security, Auburn corrected. Basic combat and first aid. So I met Damien. We were in the same training rotation. Dr. Bile the First's head crest twitched thoughtfully.
The human capacity for recovery would be a significant tactical advantage. How many of your historical battles were won by simply outlasting the enemy?
Father, Faravian interrupted. Perhaps we should focus on the medical implications rather than military applications.
The medical implications are military applications, his father countered. Think, boy. A species that can recover from nearly any non-fatal injury? That can keep fighting long after others have fallen? The galaxy's combat medicine protocols are based on species that need immediate intensive care for even minor trauma.
Which is why this research is so important, Faravian pressed. If we can understand how human healing works...
Dr. Bile!
A young intern burst into the lab, looking between father and son in confusion. The second, Nurse Rain clarified quickly. Yes, right, the intern continued. Your patient's awake. Really awake this time. He's asking about his injuries. Faravian moved quickly to the door, but his father's voice stopped him.
A moment.
Dr. Bile the First turned to Auburn.
You said humans are good at not dying. What exactly does that mean?
Auburn considered the question. Well, there's an old Earth saying. It's... what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. It's not just about healing. We actually get tougher from surviving hardship. Break a bone, heals back stronger than before. Build up calluses, skin gets thicker. Even our immune systems adapt to new threats. Both Faravians stared at her, head crests rising in synchronized shock.
Are you saying, Dr. Bile the First asked slowly, that trauma makes humans more resilient?
Within reason, Auburn shrugged. You can't just keep breaking someone's arm and expecting it to turn into steel or anything, but yeah, we adapt. It's kind of our thing.
Incredible,
Faravian breathed. And then he remembered why they were interrupted. The patient, we should...
Yes,
his father waved a wing.
Let's go. But we will discuss this adaptation later.
As they hurried toward Critical Care 3, Faravian noticed his father's feathers were slightly ruffled. A sure sign that he was deeply disturbed by something. Not that Faravian could blame him. Everything they knew about trauma response was being challenged. They found Damien propped up slightly in his bed, looking pale but alert. His eyes tracked them as they entered, focusing on their alien features with remarkable clarity for someone who had been unconscious for 2 weeks.
So,
he said, voice rough from disuse.
Either I'm hallucinating or I'm in a youth medical facility.
Station Medical 7, Faravian confirmed, moving to check his vital signs. You were brought here after...
a pirate attack. Yeah, I remember that.
Damien winced slightly as he tried to move.
How bad?
Dr. Bao the First stepped forward, his medical manner taking over.
Multiple compound fractures, severe internal trauma. By our medical standards, your injuries should have been permanently debilitating. But they're not,
Damien stated rather than asked.
Because I'm human.
Yes, both Faravians answered simultaneously, their head crests rising in shared excitement. Damien managed a weak smile.
Let me guess, you've never treated a human before.
Not one with injuries this severe, Faravian admitted. Your healing rate is unprecedented in our experience.
It's pretty standard for us.
Damien said, unconsciously echoing Auburn's earlier words.
Well, I gotta say, I never thought I'd end up as an alien science project. Medical study,
Dr. Bao the First corrected primly.
though I must admit it is fascinating.
Faravian Bill II knew his father well enough that him saying that is equivalent to declaring a medical revolution. 3 days after regaining consciousness, Damien was already trying to sit up on his own. Faravian watched with a mixture of fascination and horror as his patient grimaced through another attempt. Monitors beeped warnings about elevated heart rate and blood pressure. "You should be resting," Faravian chided, adjusting his scanner arrays. "Your bones are still..."
Healing.
Damien finished, easing back against the pillows.
But they'll heal better if I stay active. Keeping muscles engaged helps prevent atrophy.
Faravian's head crest flattened. "That contradicts every medical protocol we have. Movement during healing risks. Different biology, different rules." Nurse Rain interrupted, entering with fresh medication. "The human medical files support his approach. Their healing process actually benefits from controlled stress."
Exactly.
Damien nodded.
Had a broken leg once during basic training, and Doc made me start physical therapy before it was even fully healed. Barbaric,
Dr. Bao the First declared from the doorway. He entered carrying a datapad full of notes, his feathers perfectly groomed, as always.
And yet, effective, apparently. Your previous break healed completely?
Better than ever, Damien confirmed. Callus formation reinforced the bone. Nowadays, I can't even remember which leg it was. Both Faravians exchanged looks. The concept of healing stronger than the original state still disturbed them deeply.
Show me,
Dr. Bao the First demanded, moving closer with his own scanner.
That's kind of hard to demonstrate right now.
Damien gestured to his current injuries with his less damaged arm.
I got plenty of old breaks that you can study. Pretty much every big bone in my body has been broken at least once.
Intentionally? Faravian asked, horrified.
Ow. No. Ow. It's just an active life, Sports, military training, fights. You know how it goes.
We really don't. Nurse Rain muttered, checking his medication levels.
The point is, Damien continued, humans are built to take damage and bounce back. It's not about being invulnerable. It's about being able to recover.
A clatter from the hallway drew their attention. Auburn appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath.
Sorry I'm late. I just had to help with the new arrivals. Damien! You're sitting up? Trying to. He grinned. His folks seem to think that I should just lie here and vegetate. We think you should follow proper medical procedure,
Dr. Bao the First corrected stiffly. This is proper procedure for humans, Auburn countered.
The faster we get moving, the better we heal.
Within reason, she added, seeing Damien shift like he might try standing. Let's not push it too far, yeah? Faravian noticed his father's head crest twitching, as it does whenever his views are seriously challenged. The elder Dr. Bao had been doing that a lot lately.
If movement assists healing,
Dr. Bao the First said slowly,
then our standard treatment protocols for human patients will need significant revision. The implications for energy medicine alone.
Now who's obsessing over the research?